The world froze for a moment when the headline lit up screens across every continent. Tesla offers Elon Musk a $1 trillion compensation package. For many, it was incomprehensible, numbers that belonged more to science fiction than to the evening news. But for Elon Musk, seated quietly in a glass-walled office at Tesla's Austin headquarters, it was simply another step in a journey that had always defied logic. He leaned back in his chair, eyes flicking across the skyline as though searching for an answer hidden among the cranes and neon glow. Musk had long ago grown used to polarizing reactions. To some, he was a visionary dragging humanity toward a better future. To others, he was a reckless billionaire playing games with impossible numbers. The truth, as always, lived somewhere between the myths. What the public rarely understood was that this package wasn't a gift. It wasn't a golden check handed over for his signature. It was a bet, one of the most audacious ever written into corporate history. Tesla's board had tied it to a single colossal condition for Musk to receive a penny. The company would need to achieve a valuation of $8.5 trillion, a figure that dwarfed the GDP of entire nations. Inside Tesla's war rooms, the numbers had been scrutinized, dissected, modeled in endless spreadsheets. Some executives whispered that the challenge bordered on madness. Yet Musk had nodded without hesitation. To him, the deal wasn't about money. It was about scale. If Tesla wins, humanity wins, he had told his closest advisors. If we fail, the package means nothing. That philosophy explained everything. Tesla was no longer just a car company. It was a sprawling web of factories, AI labs, solar deployments, and robotics divisions, threads of technology weaving into the fabric of civilization. In Musk's mind, the package didn't symbolize personal wealth. It represented a civilization-sized contract, a statement that the world was ready to gamble on progress. Critics flooded the airwaves almost instantly. Television anchors scoffed at the idea of rewarding one man with the largest corporate incentive in history. Politicians demanded hearings. Economists debated endlessly on prime-time panels. Yet amid the storm of outrage, Musk remained unmoved. He had lived through darker storms, the near collapse of Tesla in 2008, the failed rocket launches of SpaceX, nights spent sleeping on factory floors when the future seemed ready to collapse. For him, this was familiar terrain. Pressure wasn't a curse, it was oxygen. The trillion-dollar figure wasn't a crown placed on his head, it was a mountain, and he was already sharpening his boots for the climb. The backlash came swiftly, like a wave crashing against steel. Headlines screamed words like excessive, outrageous, and unjust. Commentators filled the airwaves with moral outrage, declaring that no individual should ever be tied to such a figure. Protesters gathered outside Tesla showrooms holding banners that read, "No trillionaire in a world of poverty." But inside Tesla's headquarters, Musk moved through the noise with his usual detachment. He was not blind to the criticism, if anything. He read it all, often late at night, scrolling through feeds when the world was asleep. He understood the anger, even shared parts of it. After all, he had once been the man sleeping in a borrowed apartment, nearly broke, when Tesla and SpaceX both stood on the brink of collapse. People saw him now and forgot the decades of risk and sacrifice that had paved the way here. Yet what the critics missed was the structure of the deal itself. It wasn't a gift handed over for existing. It was a wager written in iron. Musk would receive nothing if Tesla failed to meet its goals. There were no bonuses for effort, no consolation prizes for trying. The numbers were cold, absolute: achieve the milestones or walk away empty-handed. For Musk, that was the point. He had never been motivated by a guaranteed paycheck. Since Tesla's early days, he had rejected salaries, insisting his fortune should rise or fall with the company's destiny. This package was only the most dramatic extension of that principle. If Tesla multiplied in value, the shareholders would profit, employees would thrive, and humanity would move closer to a sustainable future. If not, the contract would vanish into nothingness. Still, the human weight of the deal pressed heavily on him. Musk carried it in quiet moments, walking factory floors at 3 in the morning, the smell of oil and the buzz of machinery surrounding him. He carried it when he looked into the faces of engineers working 12-hour shifts, pouring their creativity into code and design. Their belief in the mission reminded him that this gamble was never about a single man. It was about the thousands of people who built the impossible piece by piece. He felt the sting of accusations labeling him greedy, but he refused to let them paralyze him. Criticism doesn't build rockets, it doesn't build cars, it doesn't solve climate change, he had once told a colleague. To him, criticism was static noise, something to be acknowledged but never allowed to slow the relentless march forward. At his core, Musk understood he was not invincible. He admitted to doubts, sleepless nights, and the constant question of whether he could carry the weight of expectation. But what steadied him was the reminder that the mission was larger than ego. It was about aligning his fate with Tesla's and Tesla's with humanity's. So while the world argued over numbers, Musk focused on factories, research labs, and prototypes. He believed the trillion-dollar storm would eventually fade into the background, leaving only the work, steel, circuits, batteries, and algorithms. And in the end, he thought, that was all that really mattered. While the public argued over morality and mathematics, Elon Musk's mind drifted elsewhere to the horizon of what came next. He rarely lingered on the noise of the present. Instead, he lived half a step into the future, mapping pathways that most dismissed as impossible. The trillion-dollar package, to him, was not a finish line. It was a doorway. He envisioned roads where no human hands touched a steering wheel, cities where the grid pulsed with clean solar energy, factories run by machines building machines, and humanoid robots working side by side with people. The package was tied to these outcomes because only their success could justify such a staggering figure. In Musk's logic, the number wasn't a prize, it was a measure of civilization's ambition. Inside Tesla's research labs, prototypes hinted at that future. Self-driving cars already navigated streets more safely than distracted human drivers. Battery packs scaled to store energy for neighborhoods, then cities, then nations. Optimus, the humanoid robot, clumsy in its first public appearance, had grown steadier with each generation, a promise of a workforce no longer chained to repetitive or hazardous labor. These were not theoretical dreams. They were steel, silicon, and code, slowly hardening into reality. Musk often walked through those labs in silence, watching engineers at their stations, young minds glowing under the pale light of monitors. He saw in them the same obsession he carried as a boy in South Africa, hiding under a blanket with a flashlight, reading science fiction while the rest of the house slept. That boy hadn't cared about wealth, he had cared about survival. Could humanity survive its own mistakes? Could it reach the stars? Now, decades later, those same questions still burned in him, and as he gazed across Tesla's floor-to-ceiling windows at the skyline beyond, he knew that the $1 trillion figure would never capture the true weight of what they were trying to build. The mission was too vast, too urgent. Critics insisted the package made him the face of excess, but Musk quietly disagreed. In his mind, the deal was not about creating the world's first trillionaire, it was about securing humanity's chance at a livable future. If Tesla achieved those milestones, the reward would ripple far beyond his bank account. Cleaner air, safer roads, sustainable energy for generations to come. Still, he carried the burden alone at times. The late-night hours, the gnawing pressure, the constant sense of balancing on a knife's edge, those were not visible in glossy headlines. Yet Musk accepted them as the price of ambition. He was not chasing comfort, he was chasing inevitability, and in his vision, a sustainable, abundant world was not a luxury, it was survival itself. The trillion-dollar package was, in the end, a symbol, a contract not just with shareholders, but with the future. And Musk, for all his flaws and controversies, had never been afraid of contracts written in impossible terms. The storm of debate refused to settle. Weeks passed, and yet television screens still flashed with panelists dissecting the trillion-dollar package. Politicians demanded answers. Economists drew charts comparing it to national budgets, and critics filled column inches with words like hubris and inequality. Outside Tesla's showrooms, small protests became larger ones, banners waving with slogans that painted Musk as both a savior and a villain. But within Tesla's factories, the atmosphere felt different. The thrum of machines, the sparks of robotic arms welding, the scent of hot metal, these were reminders that progress was not measured in headlines, it was measured in output, in problem-solving, in the relentless push of production lines. For every protester outside, There were thousands of engineers, designers, and technicians inside, working toward the milestones that defined the package. Musk spent those days moving between worlds. One moment, he was walking through rows of gleaming Model Y bodies in Fremont, pausing to speak with a young technician who had joined the company straight out of college. The next, he was on a private call with investors, explaining why Tesla's AI division would rival not just automakers, but global software giants. And at night, he was alone, standing at the edge of a gigafactory roof, staring out into the dark, listening to the low electric hum of a future still in construction. Behind the public bravado, there was a quieter struggle. Musk knew the stakes extended far beyond corporate profit. A failure to reach those ambitious targets would not just strip him of the package, it would also fracture Tesla's momentum, shaking the faith of those who had bet their careers on its mission. The weight pressed heavily, though he rarely admitted it. To the outside world, he was the relentless optimist, the man who thrived under pressure. But in his own reflections, there were doubts, moments of silence, where he wondered if even he could shoulder so much. And yet, he never let those doubts dictate his actions. "Pressure builds diamonds," he told a group of engineers one evening, pacing the floor as if the words were more for himself than for them. "If we're not uncomfortable, we're not pushing hard enough." The room, filled with tired faces and coffee cups, erupted in quiet nods. They believed him, because they had seen him live it, sleeping on factory floors, working 18-hour days, demanding the same of himself that he asked of others. The world outside might have viewed the trillion-dollar package as a symbol of greed, but inside Tesla, it became something else, a rallying cry. It was proof that the company was aiming for the impossible, that its goals were so large they defied ordinary logic. And for many within the company, that was precisely why they stayed. Musk understood that better than anyone. He knew human beings weren't inspired by small goals. They were moved by mountains, by challenges so audacious they left no choice but to dream bigger. And as the criticism continued to rage, he leaned into that truth. Because if Tesla was going to transform civilization, it couldn't be done quietly. It had to be loud, messy, controversial, and unignorable. As the weeks turned into months, the noise began to fade, replaced by a quieter kind of anticipation. The trillion-dollar package was no longer just a headline. It had become a symbol, something that hovered over every Tesla meeting, every investor call, every late-night brainstorming session. For the critics, it remained outrageous. For supporters, it was proof of a company bold enough to wager its future on civilization-sized goals. Elon Musk himself rarely spoke of the number anymore. When asked, he would shrug, almost dismissively, and pivot back to the mission: energy storage, autonomous driving, robotics, solar integration. The figure was a shadow trailing him everywhere he went, but he refused to let it define him. "It's not about the money," he told a close colleague one evening, his voice low, almost tired. "It's about aligning my fate with Tesla's fate. If Tesla wins, humanity wins. If not, the package doesn't matter." That conviction resonated deeply inside Tesla's sprawling ecosystem. Engineers who once felt crushed by deadlines now carried a different kind of fire. Designers pushing the limits of battery architecture whispered to each other about being part of history. Factory workers on the line spoke with pride about building more than just cars. They were building the backbone of a sustainable future. The package was no longer Musk's alone. It had become collective, a dare shared by all. And still, Musk carried his doubts. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the world outside was still asleep, he often stood by the massive windows of Tesla's headquarters, gazing into the distance. The pressure was unrelenting, the stakes nearly unbearable. He knew failure was possible, but he also knew that history had never been written by those who chose comfort over challenge. One night, he recalled his childhood in South Africa, lying under a blanket with a flashlight, devouring science fiction novels. Those stories had not promised him wealth or security. They had promised him survival, adventure, and the hope that humanity could outlive its own mistakes. Decades later, standing as the man at the center of a trillion-dollar storm, he realized those childhood questions still guided him. Could humanity endure? Could it become something greater? For Musk, the answer had never been guaranteed. It was a gamble, always a gamble, and the trillion-dollar package was just another wager, perhaps the biggest yet. But as he turned from the window and walked back toward the glow of screens filled with code, charts and designs, he felt the familiar pull of inevitability. The future was waiting, and it demanded audacity. In the end, the package would either vanish into history, as the most extravagant promise never fulfilled, or it would stand as the marker of a civilization that dared to bet on itself. For Elon Musk, that was enough, because to him the number was not about becoming the world's first trillionaire. It was about survival, progress, and the stubborn belief that humanity's story was only just beginning. And so, while the world debated the meaning of trillion, Musk and his teams pressed forward, building, testing, failing, and trying again. The noise would come and go, but the work, the hum of factories, the spark of invention, the pursuit of impossible goals, would endure.